Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Now, first things first, today's massive benchmark video is sponsored by us. We have some new meme merch. As you all know, the channel's official YouTube name is Unboxed, and to commemorate that, we have a new design. I reckon it looks pretty amazing. It's available on hoodies or t-shirts in either black, blue, or grey. Of course, we're not just a one meme channel, we're also commonly referred to by YouTube's closed captions as Hammer on Box. And here's the logo for that channel. See, it's a hammer on the Hardware Unboxed logo. Pretty bloody awesome stuff, that. Again, both designs are available on t-shirts or hoodies, and you have 2 weeks to get yours. This is a limited edition run. There's every chance we'll do just a single batch, and that's it. So for all the details, the link is in the video description. Now, onto the matter at hand. For those of you who missed it, last week I revisited the battle between the current generation $400 GPUs, the Radeon RX 5700 XT and GeForce RTX 2060 Super. Despite new drivers, games, and game updates, I found a very similar situation to what we encountered 7 months ago, that being a slight performance advantage going the way of the Radeon GPU. Despite offering a 15% performance uplift in about half a dozen of the games tested, the 5700 XT came out just 8% faster on average. Still, it was very clear that for the majority of games, the Radeon GPU would be the superior performer. Actually, coming away from that video, 2 things were clear. Many of you wanted an update between the 5700 XT and the more expensive 2070 Super, as well as the inclusion of DLSS results for games that supported the new and improved DLSS 2.0. So in today's video, we're going to include both of those things. In addition to the 2070 Super, I've also added the original RTX 2070 as that model was also heavily requested. Then we'll have the DLSS results for the 2060 Super, 2070 and 2070 Super in Control and Wolfenstein Youngblood. Once again for testing, we have 35 games, and as usual, we'll be taking a close look at the results for a dozen of the games tested and then jump into a 35 game performance breakdown. All testing has been conducted using our Core i9 9900K GPU test system clocked at 5 GHz with 16 GB of DDR4 3400 memory. As for the resolutions, we're covering 1080p and 1440p, but the focus of this discussion will be on the 1440p data. Okay, let's get into the results. First up, we have the Call of Duty Modern Warfare results, and this was a clear win for the 5700 XT over the 2060 Super, as it offered 22% more frames at 1440p. Now, even when compared to the 2070 Super, the 5700 XT is the superior performer, though this time by just a 5% margin, but still, that is a truly impressive result for AMD given how much cheaper the Radeon GPU is. The 2070 Super is able to pull ahead in Ghost Recon Breakpoint, making it 7% faster than the 5700 XT at 1440p, though it is worth noting that the 1% low performance was quite a bit better. Here the GeForce GPU was 16% faster, so a solid result for the 2070 Super, but it is worth noting that it does cost 25% more, so while the performance is certainly very good, the value isn't amazing, at least in this title. The 5700 XT and 2070 Super are neck and neck in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, delivering 87 FPS on average at 1440p, so a tremendously positive result for the Red Team. The RTX 2070 and 2060 Super are also neck and neck, and it appears as though the increased clock frequency for the 2060 Super makes up for it having a few less cores. Performance was competitive in Gears 5, here the 5700 XT edged ahead at 1080p, while the 2070 Super managed to push itself into the lead at 1440p by a very slim margin. So this is yet another title where the Radeon GPU punches well above its weight class. Moving on to Control, this is one of the games with DLSS 2.0 support, and we'll check those results out soon. For now though, here are the native 1080p and 1440p results. As we found last week, the 5700 XT only just manages to edge out the 2060 Super in Control, and as a result this meant the 2070 Super is 16% faster at 1440p, which admittedly still doesn't quite justify the 25% increase in price, but perhaps enabling DLSS will help here. And again, we'll look at that a little later on in the video. Next up, we have Metro Exodus, and here the 5700 XT easily beat the 2060 Super, in fact by so much that it's able to match the 2070 Super. Technically, the Radeon GPU does perform better in this title with more consistent frame time performance. For whatever reason, the 2070 Super struggled to improve upon the 1% low result of the standard 2070 and 2060 Super. Now for the Resident Evil 3 results, and here the 2070 Super is able to edge out the 5700 XT, beating it by a 7% margin at 1440p, and it has to be said, single digit gains really aren't very impressive given the price difference. In fact, here the 5700 XT performs much closer to the 2070 Super than it does the 2060 Super, so while Nvidia does get the win, this really is still a great result for AMD. Nvidia puts up a more convincing fight in Doom Eternal, beating the 5700 XT with the 2070 Super by a 21% margin. Basically, the Radeon GPU was only able to match the 2060 Super, so this handed Nvidia a pretty easy win with their $100 US more expensive GPU. Another game where the 5700 XT only managed to match the 2060 Super is Fortnite using the DirectX 12 mode. Here both GPUs averaged around 90 FPS, and that meant the 2070 Super was 17% faster, averaging just over 100 FPS. Another Battle Royale game where the Radeon performance is a bit iffy is PlayerUknown's Battlegrounds. In fact, frame rates for the 5700 XT relative to the GeForce competition are actually much worse in this title. Still, despite all that, the 2070 Super was just 21% faster, and while on its own that is a rather large margin, remember, again, Nvidia's charging 25% more. Borderlands 3 has become an AMD special, much like what we saw with Forza Horizon 4 for quite some time. It's a major outlier in our testing, but the results are accurate. Here the 5700 XT is a whopping 32% faster than the 2060 Super, and still 13% faster than the 2070 Super. So whatever optimization work the developer or AMD has been doing for the Radeon GPUs, it's clearly working. Finally, we have Battlefield 5, and here the 5700 XT is able to match the 2070 Super with an average of 100 FPS at 1440p. So again, great performance from the $400 Radeon GPU, and those are stellar frame rates for a title that looks so good at 1440p. Okay, so the Radeon RX 5700 XT certainly looked as though it was holding its own against the GeForce RTX 2070 Super. Last time out, the Radeon GPU was 6% slower at 1440p, so it'll be interesting to see if that margin has changed in a meaningful way. Oh, and remember, for all the graphs that we didn't just cover, you can grab them for free over on our Patreon page, so yeah, link for that will be in the video description. Let's first take a look at the 1080p data, and here we see the 5700 XT is still 6% slower than the 2070 Super, suffering its biggest losses in The Outer Worlds, War Thunder, Vermintide 2, Doom Eternal, and PlayerUknown's Battlegrounds. But it does see very strong performance in Borderlands 3, Dirt Rally 2.0, and Metro Exodus. It's also worth noting that for 15 of the 35 games tested, the margin is 5% or less, so overall there's really not much in it, as the 6% slower on average would suggest. The margin just seen at 1080p changes by just 1% at 1440p, and now the 5700 XT is just 7% slower, so basically the same margin that was seen 7 months ago. There's been some changes to the games used for testing, and the margins in quite a few of the titles have also changed, but at the end of the day, we end up with a very similar result. But what if we enable DLSS in Control and Wolfenstein Youngblood? Right, so enabling DLSS in Control, we see some pretty massive gains, and please note this is the quality DLSS mode, as we're running the highest possible resolution at 1440p. Frame rates for the 2070 Super were improved by 66% and 60% for the 2060 Super. This means the 2060 Super is now 48% faster than the 5700 XT, while the 2070 Super is a truly impressive 93% faster. Given we're talking about comparable image quality here between the 5700 XT and 2070 Super using DLSS, that's a devastating result for AMD. The only problem for Nvidia and their customers right now being that just 4 games support DLSS 2.0, and we're testing with just 2 of them. The second game that we're testing with is of course Wolfenstein Youngblood, and here DLSS has a far less significant impact on performance, and that's because frame rates are already very high to begin with. DLSS 2.0 still takes a certain amount of time to compute, and this overhead creates a bit of a bottleneck for higher end GPUs, or in games that don't require loads of rendering power such as Youngblood. Even so, we're still seeing a 17% performance uplift for the 2070 Super, and given we're not seeing any noticeable reduction in image quality, in fact under close scrutiny Tim says it's exactly the same, so given that I think this is still a very good result. It also means whereas the 2060 Super was slow on the 5700 XT without DLSS, enabling it allows the GeForce GPU to take the lead by a 15% margin. It also means the 2070 Super is now 37% faster, so another convincing win here for the green team with DLSS enabled. Taking into account those big DLSS enabled gains in Wolfenstein, Youngblood and Control, we see that the 5700 XT is now 9% slower on average, so just a 2% difference. This means for DLSS to really cripple AMD and have a meaningful impact for RTX owners, Nvidia really needs to drastically improve game support, and we're not sure when or if that's going to happen. So for now, it is an impressive technology that works well in the games that we've tested, but given it was implemented 6 months after these games were released, and it's yet to find its way into newer titles, it's really not something that's likely going to tempt you into buying the 2060 Super over the 5700 XT, as an example. I don't mean to sound dismissive or negative towards DLSS if that's the vibe I'm giving off. Nvidia's certainly done a great job reinventing what DLSS is and how it works, and they've without question come a long way from those horribly blurry initial implementations, so kudos to them. The problem now is game support. We just need a lot more of it, but Tim and myself believe you'll only see DLSS support in Nvidia sponsored titles, aka GameWorks titles, and if that is the case, then not enough games will see DLSS support. As it stands right now, with big gains in less than half a dozen titles, DLSS it isn't a reason to buy these new RTX graphics cards, and Nvidia really does need to do better than that, and this is where price factors into the equation. The 5700 XT is still a good bit cheaper than the 2070 Super. At the MSRP, the GeForce GPU costs 25% more. ASRock's also trying to flog off their 5700 XT Challenger D for just $350 US at the time of making this video, and while not a particularly impressive model, for that price it is a steal. Then over here in Australia at PC K-Skier, the cheapest 2070 Super comes in at $920, though most are priced over $1,000. Meanwhile, the cheapest 5700 XT comes in at just $730, and there's almost half a dozen models under $800. So comparing the cheapest models, the 2070 Super is still 26% more expensive in the land down under. So in terms of value, the 2070 Super it isn't as good. It costs at least 25% more for just 7% more performance on average, 9% if you include those DLSS results. Still, if you're going to prioritize performance, then the Nvidia GPU is better, but if that's the case, then you'd probably just grab something like a 2080 Super or 2080 Ti. I should note though, for those of you wanting to game at 4K, the 2070 Super is worth spending the extra $100 US or so on, as the 9% boost it offers on average does typically translate into a better gaming experience. Also, for those of you wondering why I didn't test at 4K this time, it does take a huge amount of work per resolution for this 30 plus game benchmark, and initially I had only planned to compare the 5700 XT and 2060 Super, both of which are better suited to the 1080p and 1440p resolutions. Also, recent polls have suggested to us that 1080p higher refresh rate gaming is far more popular among our viewers than 4K gaming. So there really should be more of you who are interested in 1080p high refresh rate performance than 4K gaming. In the end, I think the 5700 XT is an obvious choice when compared to the 2060 Super, but the right choice is less obvious when comparing the 2070 Super and 5700 XT. Personally, I feel most gamers targeting 1080p and 1440p resolutions, the Radeon RX 5700 XT is going to be the smarter choice in terms of value, but if you are seeking maximum performance at 1440p, or perhaps in the future, or maybe even now you want to jump to 4K, then the 2070 Super might be worth spending a little extra on. Either way though, I really don't feel like you can go too wrong here. Both deliver exceptional performance. And that's going to do it for this one. If you enjoyed the video, well, that is fantastic news. You can also like and subscribe to show your appreciation and get more content just like this, plus all the other stuff we do on the channel. And yeah, don't forget about Hammer On Box and Harbor Boxed, our awesome new merch. I love this stuff. I think it's really fun. So yeah, if you want that, don't mess around because it is only around for about 2 weeks, or I think, yeah, 2 weeks. So limited edition stuff, but yeah, very cool. Tim and myself love it, so hopefully you guys do as well. We also have Patreon, so you can sign up there for our exclusive Discord chat, become part of the Harbor On Box community. It's a really cool place to be. There's also the live stream that'll be coming up very shortly. I think we've got that scheduled for next week. Q&As, there's behind the scenes stuff. Yeah, that's Patreon. But if you're interested, links in the video description, you can go check that out. But above all else, thank you for watching. I'm your host, Steve, and I'll see you again next time.